What's up, good people of the world? It's the Big Heavy, and I'm coming to you with something a little bit new and different. So, would appreciate any feedback in the comments. Let me know if you like this, if you don't. But trying to do a segment that's a little faster, a little more fast-paced, in addition to some of the long-form reviews that I do, and something that I can put out a little more regularly. And what I want to do is just talk about 3 cool things. And those could be current events, those could be podcasts, those could be videos I found, they could be products, techniques I found that have helped me in my life, and just cool things I've come across that I want to share with you. And as always, I'll throw links down in the description. I'll let you know if anything's sponsored or not sponsored, just so you have that information. In this case, nothing I'm going to talk about has been provided for free or anything like that. And hopefully you find this interesting and helpful, and let's get right into it.
Scene 1.
So the first thing I want to talk about is a podcast that really helped deepen my understanding of the conflict that's been going on in Israel between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And obviously there's nothing cool about a conflict, especially one of that nature that's been going on for decades. But if you're like me, you probably had kind of a passing understanding of what was going on. You maybe read the papers, watched the news, considered yourself reasonably well informed, but maybe didn't understand some of the historic roots, didn't really understand all the parties and how geopolitics played into that, and even in my case, kind of the founding story of Israel. And the podcast I'm about to mention, which is called the Martyrmade podcast, has a great series about Israel and its founding, kind of the history of Zionism, how all this played into World War II and the British and the other Arab nations and nationalism and Palestine, and really does, I thought, a very even-handed and thorough job of covering all these nuances that I didn't really know about. And I came out with a much deeper understanding of the history of the region, the history of this particular conflict. I think I'll give you a bit of a spoiler alert, and if you're looking for a good guy versus a bad guy kind of story, you're not going to get that. I don't think in this case there really is a clear, side A is right, side B is wrong type of story. But if you're seeing what's going on there now and kind of saying, why is this the way it is, highly recommend that Martyrmade podcast. I think it'll really give you a deeper understanding of what went on, maybe give you a little more sympathy for both sides, and if nothing else, a much more informed point of view of what's going on in the region.
Thing 2.
So thing 2 is a bit about running. And I think I've mentioned that I'm a runner in some of the past podcasts, and I'm not one of these people that ran my whole life, that loved running from a youth and was on cross country and track and all that stuff. Frankly, in my youth, I was a bit of a couch potato, I think is the nice way of putting it. Probably a chubby little fat kid is the more accurate and perhaps blunt way of putting it. But spent more time rocking out playing some video games, some old school Jordan versus Bird action on the green monochrome monitor, if that rings a bell to any of the oldsters in the room. But suffice to say, I think I probably ran 4 miles in my entire life up until my 30s. And when I did try and make those kind of half-hearted efforts in my later years to become a runner, I'd make it half a mile, be panting and ready to fall over, and just say, hey, for whatever reason, I don't have the genetic makeup or constitution to be a runner, and forget about it until, for whatever reason, a few years later, I was inspired to repeat the same exercise again with the same output. And what ultimately got me to reconsider running as a long-term fitness activity was I was traveling a ton for work. And there's variable qualities of gyms. If you've ever been to hotels on a regular basis, some have these fantastic professional grade gyms with all sorts of equipment. In some it's a rusty set of free weights and a broken down treadmill and a disgusting bike sitting in a corner. And I was just getting in worse and worse shape, gaining more and more weight, just feeling kind of blah with myself. And I sat down, thought about it, and really the only activity I could do consistently pretty much anywhere in the world with zero dependence on equipment was running. And I explored every option I could think of. There were points where I thought of, could I fly bicycles out with me? Could I get a folding bicycle? Should I just start walking? And there was a time challenge to that. So as much as I did the math to try and work around it, running was the only activity I could do everywhere. Didn't require any equipment beyond some running shoes and some shorts and a t-shirt, and didn't require any particular temperature or climate. So, picture me there kind of doing this mental math over and over again, hoping to get a different answer, but every time I tried to work out the problem, the answer was always running. So I finally resolved, let's figure this out. And I found a program that's now wildly popular. You know, it's kind of everywhere. I think running's fallen out of vogue a little bit, but it's called Couch to 5K. And that's the cool thing I want to mention. And take it from somebody that never ever thought they would or could be a runner. You know, someone who thought that they literally had a genetic predisposition against running or, you know, fitness in general. And I started running about 13 years ago from absolute zero. You know, again, couldn't make it more than half a mile before falling down panting. Followed Couch to 5K, repeated several weeks, which is kind of the pro tip I'll leave you. You know, I think it's a 12 or 13 week plan. If a week's hard, just keep doing that week over. You know, I had 3 or 4 laps around week 6 and 7 where I just had to keep doing the week over before I felt like I wouldn't die. And I eventually did my first 5K, you know, eventually parlayed that into half marathons, did my first ultra marathon earlier this year. So it is possible, even if you feel like the most abject, absolute couch potato that, you know, can't run because your DNA is explicitly designed to not allow you to run, you can do it. You know, start slow, do that Couch to 5K thing. If the 12-week program takes you 1,200 weeks, at least you're moving in the right direction. So highly, highly, highly recommend that.
Thing 3.
So thing 3 is a technique that I'm actually deploying in these videos and find it super helpful in public speaking, in work, in pretty much everything. And that's what I call the rule of 3. And basically that's whenever anyone asks you a question, respond with, there's 3 cool things, or 3 interesting things, or 3 noteworthy things. Just always 3 things that you're going to reply to that question with. Now, why is this technique important? Well, there's 3 reasons. Number 1 is that it makes it a little more interesting response. You know, you're saying, hey, there's 3 things, and then you start with thing 1 and you leave the person you're speaking to wondering, oh, okay, you know, what's 2 and 3? There's a little bit of suspense here. Second interesting aspect is you can always think of at least a couple things for any topic. You know, somebody says to me, what are the 3 most important things about, you know, fashion design? I can probably make up 1 or 2 just on the fly. And while I'm speaking and reciting those 1 or 2, my brain is furiously working in the background and coming up with that 3rd thing. So it gives you a way to sound more knowledgeable since you have 3 things to respond to versus just 1 or 2 kind of off the cuff remarks. Builds that interest in the audience. You know, they're sitting there saying, thing 1 was kind of cool. What are thing 2 and thing number 3? And it's also, you know, just a nice number of items or responses to throw out in a conversation. You know, so there's 18 things that are important when you're shopping for a new car. People are probably gonna get bored by 4 or 5, so it's the right number, keeps you interesting, gives you something to talk about, and, you know, again, you can probably pull 1 or 2 things about pretty much any topic out of your memory bank and then furiously concoct the 3rd one while you're spitting out those 1 or 2. So great conversational technique, great technique at work. You know, whenever anyone asks me, you know, what are the 3 most important things about leadership, I can spout off 1 or 2 and then make up the 3rd as I go. So apply that technique where you can. I'm going to continue applying it to these 3 cool things videos, and drop me a comment if you think this was interesting and effective. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, you know, hit all the buttons. It's fantastic. It lets our robot overlords know that you care, and have a great week. Thanks.